Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to your Lake Fork Guide. Welcome back to the Guides Network. Coming to you straight from the border, baby. We down here on El Falcon down in Mexico. Fish are kind of spawning to pre-spawn a little bit. And anytime you got pre-spawn fish or spawning fish on a lake like Falcon, it's got a lot of shallow cover, hard cover, got a lot of rock. There ain't much better technique than going out with old square bill crankbait. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. Alright guys, square bill crankbaits. Go ahead and go over the setup first. Now, the first thing is with a square bill, you gotta have the right rod. And honestly, you know, where I fish with a lot of heavy cover and big fish, we typically throw big, heavy rods. Well, we're not gonna do that here. And the reason why is, when you've got these treble hook baits, when you hook that fish, typically, that is the only hook you have in it. Now that's a very small hook. So you need some rod with some give to it to keep you from ripping that hook away from that fish. The rod that works perfect for me is in the 6 Cents Luxe series, and it's the 7.4 medium heavy cranking rod. It's actually a rod designed for shallow cranking. You know 6 Cents, the shallow crankbait is kind of their flagship, where they started. Kind of has always been their bread and butter type of bait that they've made from day one. So you know they've designed a rod that's absolutely perfect for fishing a shallow crankbait. So check out the 7.4 medium heavy shallow cranking rod in the Luxe series at 6 Cents. When you go to 6centsfishing.com, which is linked in the description of course, be sure you punch in the code Your Lake Fork Guide on the checkout screen in the promo box. You get a 10% discount on all orders. Line's another big thing, because the lighter the line, the smaller the diameter. It's always going to be fluorocarbon. Always. I don't want floating line on my shallow crankbaits, and the reason why is I want that line to sink to help me get that bait down. And the smaller, thinner diameter line you have, the less resistance it has, and the deeper the crankbait will actually run. That being said, we got big fish around here, guys. Y'all seen some of them. Y'all know what Lake Falcon can produce. Y'all know what Fort can produce, all these Texas lakes. I really don't like the shallow crank with less than 17-pound line on these type of lakes that are just full of junk, as you can see. And there's a lot of rock in this lake as well down here at Falcon. So I'm always going with about 17-pound fluorocarbon line for my shallow cranking needs. On a reel speed, I'll actually go 6.3 to 1, and the reason that is, in shallow cranking, you're not typically just crawling a shallow crankbait. It's not like deep cranking where sometimes you need to just crawl it down there. And you don't need the winch. There's not all that resistance and all that drag where you need that winch strength of that lower gear ratio reel. So I'll actually use a 6.3 to 1, slow it down a little bit. I can speed it up when I need to. When that fish hits that bait and starts running at me, I can pick up more line that way. So I go with 6.3 to 1 reel. Let's talk about the baits themselves. And there's kind of two square bills that I mostly use. Now 6 Cents makes a few different ones that are really good. The regular old school square bill is the Crush 50X and the Crush 50X Silent. The one that I use more often than not is the Crush 100X. Basically, it's a bigger version. It's just the same square bill, but a bigger version. You know, nowadays this doesn't even look like a crankbait. There's crankbaits way bigger than that. 6 Cents has crankbaits way bigger than this. But back in the day, when Strike King first came out with a 2.5, everybody thought that right there was a huge bodied crankbait. I just fish it because I don't feel like I lose any bites. I don't really feel like there's very many times, especially where I am, where we have a lot of big bait, the fish are big. You don't need to really go down to that small crankbait. You're not losing any bites by not going to the small crankbait, I should say. The other one that I will throw is the 6 Cents Movement L7 square bill. Y'all have heard me talk about Movement 80X if you watch this channel. Well, this is the Movement L7. Now this actually has a little bit tighter wiggle than the Crush 100. When the fish really aren't biting aggressively and you need a little more subtle tactic, but you think square bill crankbait's the way to go, check out the Movement L7. A little tighter wiggle, get some different bites. Now on color, guys, I keep it pretty simple. There's just a few that I run with. The first one that you have to have is going to be a shad pattern. This is one that I like a lot right here. It's called Wild Shad. It's one of my very favorite shad patterns. Second, and this one will always be in my boat as well, chartreuse blackback. Especially when the water's dirty, this is my absolutely favorite color. And third, got to have a bluegill color. Some type of brim or bluegill color like this one right here will work phenomenally around the spawn. The post-spawn time when the brim starts spawning, These colors right here are absolutely deadly. I will reach for those first and foremost in the spawn and the post-spawn time periods. And last, but certainly not least, when you're down here in the south, whether it's Lake Falcon, Lake Fort, Guntersville, Florida, anywhere across the south, man, there's just something about a crawfish colored crankbait that fish just can't resist. Now this is a pretty simple technique, guys, and when it comes to area, it's no different. It's pretty simple. Kind of what you see behind me is what you're looking for. Big, expansive, shallow water flats. That's what you're looking for. These fish, when they're getting ready to spawn, they like to spread out across these big flat areas. What you want to do is, if it's pre-spawn period, you want to find these big flats, and then you want to find the subtle little drains and ditches that run through them, the little elevation changes. That's where I'm going to spend most of my time with a square-billed crankbait. I'm going to stick to in the pre-spawn period, I'm going to stick right to the edges of those drains, maybe a little bit outside, maybe down in the middle, but I'm always going to be around those drains in the pre-spawn. Now, once they start spawning, that's when it becomes really, really imperative to have a square-billed crankbait tied on, because they'll get up on these flats and spread out, and now you've got to cover a bunch of water. And the best thing about square-billed crankbait is it deflects off all this hard cover, wood, rock. It bounces off it real good. So it allows you to fish a moving bait very quickly, very efficiently, with relatively few hang-ups, and cover a ton of water to locate those spread out spawning fish. That's the deal with a square-billed crankbait during the spawn. Now on the retrieve, again, it's a really simple technique. It's kind of, you throw it out there, you point your rod down, and you just reel. And that's really all there is to it. You can vary the speed of it. You can stop and go a little bit if you want to, but really you just throw it out there, point your rod down, start reeling in, and when they bite, you just kind of turn and reel a little faster. You really don't want to be swinging, setting the hook, or nothing like that. The big deal is the deflection. So when you're casting it out there, you can cast it across there and you're hoping that you hit the deflections, or if you have an opportunity, if you look way off in the distance behind me there's some little stumps, not this little skinny stuff here. That has too much limberness to it. It won't deflect off that very well. But there's some actual hardwood trees in the background sticking up out of the water. When I see something like that, I'll actually make my cast past that tree, point my rod to the left or the right, and intentionally steer that crankbait into that tree, because as that crankbait comes up to that tree and that head shaking, when that bill hits that tree, that crankbait will bounce like that right there, and that causes a lot of reaction bites. And a lot of times your biggest bites that you're going to get on a square bill, and they get big bites, will come right as that crankbait deflects off wood. All right, guys, short episode today. Really simple technique, but an absolutely wonderful technique. All you need to do, go to sixcensefishing.com, get you some of them good square bills. I'm talking about them good ones, you know what I'm saying? Punch in that code, your Lake Fort Guide, get that 10% discount, tie it on the right rod with the right line, and chunk and wine, baby. Hey, we sure appreciate you guys watching this episode of the Guys Network. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope that it helps you, and we'll see you guys next time right here on your Lake Fort Guide.